Name is Isabelle Shapiro, and this is my presentation on the data analysis and mapping project I've worked on this year. Back in September, Ms. Wright introduced me to Liberty Hill, an organization that fights for social justice in Los Angeles. They had a data file they obtained from a connection in the LAPD that contained records of all the arrests of teenagers aged 13 to 17 in LA County in 2019, and they needed someone to analyze the data. They were particularly interested in the arrests of female minors. So this is the data they gave me. It was a considerable amount of data. It contained all the arrests, all minor arrests in 2019. And I determined that these area values in this column here corresponded to these 21 LAPD divisions, with 99 being unknown. This was an extremely crucial development because all of the analysis I did going forward and with my mapping project in mind was done by area. So I did all of my data analysis in Google Code Laboratory using Python. After meeting with a representative from Liberty Hill, I determined what the information was that I wanted to find from this data. And for each area number, what I wanted to know was, first of all, the name of the area, the total number of arrests, and the total number of female arrests, and what percentage of the area was female, the number of female arrests filed as each category of dissent that the police use, which they divide into H for Hispanic, B for Black, A for Asian, W for white, and O for other. I wanted to know the top 3 most common charges per area and how many arrests were correlated with those charges. And finally, the number of females for each age 13 through 17. So the most challenging part of the data analysis was figuring out how to organize the data. I initially converted the overall CSV file that I imported to a data frame, which is a data storage method you can import into Python through the library pandas. I continued to use data frames, dictionaries, and lists to store correlated data throughout my analysis. So, one second. Yeah, here. So here's an example of how I coded the most common charge section of my code. So this code here goes through the data frame of all the female arrests in the file and creates an individual data frame for each area that's accessible by area number. This code right here returns a list of the 3 most common charges for women in a particular area in order of how popular the charge was. And this function returns the correlated numbers to those charges found in this function. To store my final data that I would export, which I showed you about a minute ago, I made one large data frame and added lists to it. So with the code we just looked at up here, I had to create 6 lists for the 6 columns in my final data table that these values would take up. Once I had each list, I'd go to my final data, which was in the form of a pandas data frame, and convert my lists into data frames, and then add them to my overall data frame using the pandas concat function. So once I had finished my data analysis, I exported my data as a CSV file, which is what this is. So as you can see, for each area, I have all of the data that I was looking for initially. So, and then this is also what I imported into processing to start my mapping project, which I will show you now. So this is my project. As you can see, when I hover, this is a map of LA County, and when I hover over each area, the data that I analyzed for each area comes up in the right in this data box. So how did I do it? I started by importing my data that I had done in Python in, and I also used this class, which luckily for me, someone had already created, And I use this in combination with a map of the LAPD divisions in the shapefile format to create this map that can be hovered over to access data, which is all in here. My display stats function, which is right here, is where I format all my data from the table that I imported. And the last step of this project was just to display the correct data when I hovered over the map region. So the map I imported recognized area numbers as strings, so I just had to convert them into integers in order for them to work with my display stats function and just how I could access my imported data. So now looking back to my project, now that I've spent this whole year working on it, what does this actually show? So I'm not going to go too far into detail, but just from looking at the map, two things are very clear. First of all, there are considerably more arrests of female minors in areas known to be lower income with larger Black and brown populations than in affluent white areas. For example, Topanga had 85 total arrests, 21 of them female, and 77th Street had 232 total arrests, 52 of them female. And in every area, the vast majority of arrests are of Black and Latinx teenagers. You can just see from going through, the number of white teenagers who are being arrested is considerably lower in every area, regardless of where you are in the city. And it's also really interesting to look at why these girls were being arrested. Overall, the most common charge was robbery, but a lot of common charges were park restrictions or smoking weed in public that are getting girls arrested. It's also really interesting to look at an area like Hollenbeck with known to have larger police presence, and the most common charges that young girls are being arrested for are nighttime curfew restrictions, purchasing or providing tobacco, and petty theft. And then you go look in West Los Angeles, known to have a smaller police presence, and there you see fewer young girls being arrested for more major crimes like battery on domestic partner, robbery, assault with a deadly weapon. So it's, at least with these two areas, it's pretty clear how the larger police presence is affecting girls, because people in West Los Angeles aren't being arrested for nighttime curfew restrictions. So with more research into the circumstances that led to these results, I really hope that this project and that this map and my data analysis brings about or can help bring about necessary change in our city. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.